Now, let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. Let's talk about some training camp defensive storylines that we've seen thus far. The biggest one to me is how the team is executing and experimenting with Anthony Barr rushing off the edge. You see the clips of him rushing off the edge and participating with the defensive ends and the defensive line in certain drills. And that's very interesting to me because I think the whole idea behind this is to get him back to where he is most comfortable. And defensive end is what he played at UCLA. And the team invested a first-round pick, taking him number 9 overall in 2014 draft. And that's what he played coming out of UCLA. He was known as this guy that was going to be a supremely talented edge rusher. And the Vikings took a lot of people by surprise when they moved him to off-ball linebacker. He's played primarily Sam linebacker in his role here in Minnesota. And last year, Pro Football Focus only had him as an edge rusher in 17% of his snaps. The team wants to increase that snap total a bit because they feel like that's where he potentially could increase his value, because that's what he did going back to college, and he's shown that he is very comfortable coming off the edge. I believe he had 4 sacks his rookie year, but since that point, the numbers have dwindled down, and he has never been over 2 since that year. 2016 was a rocky road with him, and Mike Zimmer called him out a lot for coasting. And he felt like that Barr wasn't giving 100% effort during that season. And he just did not look like his normal self. We saw a bunch of highlight plays in 2014. We saw a bunch of highlight plays in 2014 and 2015, most notably the Tampa Bay Bucs game his rookie year, where he single-handedly won the game in overtime with a strip fumble and a touchdown. So those are just the highlight plays that we want to see Anthony Barr get back to. But staying on topic with him being an edge rusher, this is very interesting to me because the Vikings are stacked at that position already. They have Everson Griffin. They have Danielle Hunter. Brian Robinson is the seasoned veteran in that spot. But you have young guys who are yet to emerge, and Tayshawn Bauer, Afadi Adenabo, Stephen Weatherly, and a host of other guys that they're excited about. Ade Aruna is a rookie that they seem to be high on as well. So are they going to take reps from those guys to experiment with Anthony Barr? Or are they going to try it early on? And if he doesn't have some success with it, are they just going to scrap it as a whole? So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. The other angle of this to me is that Anthony Barr wants his agents to be able to go to the negotiating table and be able to use that angle of him being an edge rusher to his advantage. What I mean by that is edge rushers are paid significantly more than off-ball linebackers. I don't have the numbers here in front of me, but we've seen guys like Von Miller get supremely paid as opposed to a guy like Luke Kuechly. His yearly averages are way higher than Kuechly's averages. And defensive end is seen as a premium position throughout the NFL. While linebacker is a very important position, but we've seen edge rushers single-handedly win Super Bowls. And just going back again to Von Miller, how he won that Super Bowl against the Carolina Packers, where he won that Super Bowl against the Carolina Panthers. He had the strip fumble that secured the game for them. And that's just something that Anthony Barr and his reps want to be able to take to the negotiating table because their sole responsibility is to get the most money for their clients possible. And using Anthony Barr in this hybrid defensive end role and linebacker role is just it's making him wear more hats on this defense. And they want to show just how valuable Anthony Barr is. I think he's going to have a big season. What I'm really looking forward to seeing, though, is how long this defensive end experiment lasts with him and just how much they use him off of the edge. Transitioning to the back half of the defense, I want to get into Holton Hill and Mike Hughes. Let's first talk about Mike Hughes, though. There's been a lot of buzz about Mike Hughes, how smooth he's looked, how comfortable he's looked in Mike Zimmer's defense right away. And I found that very interesting because the biggest thing that you hear about cornerbacks evolving or stepping onto an NFL field is how slow their transition is. to finding out the speed of the game and the techniques that they're being taught. You haven't heard that at all about Mike Hughes. And Mackensie Alexander, who was the Vikings' third-year corner, had an interesting quote about Mike Hughes, and he said that he already looks comfortable and he's already where he wanted to be coming into the league. That was very big to me because Mackensie Alexander is the guy that's competing with Mike Hughes for that nickel cornerback spot, and it's sort of like he already admitted defeat to him in this position battle. And Mackensie Alexander is a guy that has a lot of pride. He's shown to be a very confident player, but him openly coming out and saying that just shows you how far along that Mike Hughes is right now in Mike Zimmer's defense. And I love that Mike Priefer came out and named Mike Hughes the starting kick returner from day one, which is where I think he's going to make his most contributions early on as a rookie. But as the season progresses and the season goes along, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Mike Hughes begins to overtake Mackensie Alexander in that nickel role. And I think Alexander had a really good year last year. He was very underrated in what he was asked to do. Of course, he had some spotty play in some games last year, but overall, I thought he had a very solid year. But now Mike Hughes comes into the fold, who I think was a better prospect entering the NFL. And I think his technique is much more advanced than what Mackensie Alexander's was coming into the NFL. And he has more upside because of the special teams value that he does bring to the table. So that nickel cornerback spot is something that's going to be something that I will keep my eyes glued to. Now, just monitoring this guy, you would have thought that this was the Vikings' first-round pick, and that's undrafted free agent cornerback Holton Hill. He's the one player outside of Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook and Stephon Diggs. He's the one player on the defensive side of the ball that has generated the most buzz early on in Vikings training camp. Talk about a guy that's 6'2", that long, lanky corner that Mike Zimmer loves to have in-house. He's really low on the pecking order right now, but the Vikings invested a historic amount of money in order to get him. The Vikings invested a historic amount of money to him, more than any other undrafted free agent that they have ever given to. I don't like that. I want to quickly transition to another guy, though. And you would have thought that this guy was the Vikings' first-round pick. And that's undrafted free agent cornerback Holton Hill. Holton Hill has come in and created a lot of buzz. Came in with a lot of hype. Everyone thought that he would get drafted, and he was even in the top 50 of some draft. He was even in the top 50 of some well-respected draft media analysts. And he was even in the top 50 of some well-respected draft media analysts big board. What you're getting with Holton Hill, is a guy that is that long and lanky corner that Mike Zimmer loves to have in-house, just over 6'2". So he has that size that Mike Zimmer typically loves in the past about his corners. We've seen it with Trey Waynes, and we've also seen it with Xavier Rhodes as well. So he has the physical traits that Mike Zimmer loves to see in his corners. You're getting that with Trey Waynes and also Xavier Rhodes as well. He has some very similar traits that mirrors both of those guys and the traits that Mike Zimmer requires as well. He has really good hips, and he moves seamlessly. He has really good hips, and you can see the techniques that Mike Zimmer is already instilling and teaching him, and he seems to be taking it and running with it as well. What I love the most is you see veterans like Xavier Rhodes and Terrence Newman taking him under his wing, because that is the type of guidance that he needed that he didn't get at Texas. Everyone knows about his past and the failed drug test, and that was the biggest reason why he did end up going undrafted. But he has the right guys in place in Newman and Rhodes that can take him under their wings, because both of those guys have had an ample amount of success in the NFL, and he needs those type of role models in the NFL And he needs those type of role models in the NFL because they're going to help him spread his wings and be a very good player in the NFL. He's not forced to play right away, which is really good for the Vikings. So they can steadily bring him along slowly. And I think his career trajectory can be very good later on down the road, 2 to 3 years when some of those guys get older and maybe get expensive to where the Vikings can't keep. But right now, the buzz is really high about Holton Hill. And he's one guy I'm looking forward to seeing in the preseason games because of the amount of hype that he has generated and just how well he has looked in training camp thus far. Moving on to our final segment, it is our weekly mailbag of Vikings questions. Now, I specifically asked for training camp questions this week because that is the topic of discussion right now. We're in the middle of training camp, and I'm moving on to our final segment, and is my weekly mailbag where I ask my Twitter followers just some general questions about the Vikings, whether that's training camp or just some concerns that they have about the upcoming season. And once again, I just want to thank all you guys for sending in your questions. It's greatly appreciated. It's greatly appreciated. If I did not get to your question, please continue to send them in. I will make sure I get to everybody's question as soon as I can. The first question comes from David Cromwell at DCromNFL, and he asked, how is the D-line rotation looking beyond the starting four coming along? This is a really good question because the second and third groups of the Vikings defensive line has been something that has been highly debated because without question, they have one of the top defensive lines in the NFL with Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter coming off the end, and in the middle they have Linval Joseph and the newest addition is Sheldon Richardson. But beyond that, they do have some depth questions. Outside of Brian Robinson, pretty much everyone is a question mark at this point because we really don't know what they can do. But Jaleel Johnson is a guy that they're bringing along slowly that played a lot at the tail end of the year that showed some flashes. Tayshawn Bauer flashed in a few games last year and even had a sack against the Rams, which was really good to see. Stephen Weatherly is a guy that they have invested a lot of reps in, and they would like to see his progress or his development come along a little bit faster and speed up a bit because they're going to need that depth. Brian Robinson obviously is the savvy and seasoned veteran, and I really don't count him because we know what he's going to be at this point. He's a guy that's going to be the ultimate depth piece among all four positions up front. They signed David Perry, who I think is going to be a sneaky good signing behind Linval Joseph. Now, he's not going to play more than 20% of the snaps for the year, but if Linval Joseph somehow goes down with injury or if he's just tired and needs a blow, David Perry is a guy that can step in right away and be a quality piece for Linval Joseph if he does somehow manage to go down or miss some time. And a guy I think that's not being talked about enough is Jalen Holmes, who I think is going to be an ultimate chess piece along the defensive line, and that's something that he proved to be at Ohio State as well. He played everything from defensive end to that one technique spot. Now, he's not going to play that one technique spot in the NFL because he's just not big enough. But if you talk about him playing on third down, that outside defensive end role, that five technique, or sliding down inside to play that three technique behind Sheldon Richardson, I think that's something that he is. I think that's something that he is capable of being or being able to do as well. Our next question, Our next question comes from Jake Arndt, and it's at Arndt_Jake. Who do you think has the most successful season for all of the Vikings rookies? This is a really good question because I think Daniel Carlson gets swept under the rug a lot. And because he's a specialist, a lot of fans forget about the impact that he potentially can have this upcoming season. Everyone wants to talk about Mike Hughes and Holden Hill and the impact that they think that they might have. But I think Daniel Carlson is the one rookie that's going to have the most impact on the team this year because he is the kicker. And we all know those field goals can come down to a win or lose situation. As Vikings fans, we all know that crucial kick could be at any moment for this fan base. And we've experienced enough heartbreak to never underestimate how important a kicker can come down to being. And Daniel Carlson comes in with another guy and Daniel Carlson is a guy that comes in with a lot of hype as well. Comes in with a big leg. He comes in with a big leg, and he's known for kicking those 50-plus yard field goals consistently. Also, he's used as a weapon on kickoffs as well, where he led the nation. And he's also known as a weapon on kickoff as well, where he can consistently kick it out of the end zone and garner some of those touchbacks as well. So Daniel Carlson can prove to be an ultimate weapon for this team as well. If he comes in and is very consistent and he knocks down those field goals, 40, 50-plus yards, I think he is the one rookie that is going to have the biggest impact. Our final question comes from Rodrigo. Our final question comes from Rodrigo Nunez at RM Nunez. Our final question comes from Rodrigo Nunez at _RM Nunez. Can Treadwell be the third wide receiver? I think he can. And there's been some glowing reviews about him to this point in training camp. And he's never going to be the guy that we thought he was coming out of Ole Miss that set all of the SEC records and lit the record books on fire. He's never going to be that dominant number one wide receiver like a lot of fans wanted him to be when they did draft him in the first round of the 2016 draft. He's just never going to be that guy because he just doesn't have the explosiveness and the athleticism required to take over games and be that lead wide receiver of the corps. And also, the Vikings already have two of the best wide receivers in the entire NFL, Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. So his touches and his targets are already going to be limited. But Kirk Cousins is a guy that's known to spread the wealth around. He never primarily targets one guy, and he's not scared to target all the guys on the field, whether that's Rudolph, the dynamic duo of Diggs and Thielen, or Treadwell in those red zone situations. Or if he just wants Treadwell to be a chain mover on third down, I'm completely fine with that. Because we've all seen that one thing that Laquan Treadwell can do is that he can be a chain mover. He's a guy that you can consistently go to and depend on him to win on third down. Now he needs to evolve into that guy that can be that consistent red zone threat to where he can box out those defenders and go up and get the ball and snatch it out of the air to come down with those touchdowns. If he's able to evolve into that type of role and prove to consistently be that type of guy, I think he's going to have no problems evolving into that number 3 wide receiver behind the dynamic duo already in place of Diggs and Thielen. And that's today's show, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed my biggest training camp storylines off. And that's today's show, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed my biggest training camp storylines on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. We also dived into some specialists as well. And, of course, we always end Thursday's show with my mailbag of the Q&A. Once again, thank all of you guys for sending in your questions. I'm Jordan Reed. You can check out my work at InsideThePyline.com. You can also go over to ClimbingThePocket.com, and you can also listen to my good friend Andy Carlson on Purple for the Win podcast, to where I make my weekly appearances on Thursdays and or Fridays. So make sure to go check out all of that on I'll be back on Sunday to talk about more training camp storylines, also to dive into some more Q&A questions that I didn't get to. So continue to send in your questions, and I'll make sure I get to them. Thank you guys for listening. Skol Vikings.